10 Golden Age stars whose plastic surgery went tragically wrong. They were Hollywood's most beautiful faces, luminous stars whose features graced silver screens in an era when close-ups captured every angle, every expression, every subtle shift of emotion. Their beauty wasn't just physical, it was their currency, their power, their entire livelihood in an industry that worshipped youth and perfection. Audiences knew every line of their faces, every characteristic feature that made them unforgettable. But behind the glamorous facade, many of these stars were quietly desperate, turning to a medical field that was still in its experimental infancy. Plastic surgery in the 1930s through 1960s bore little resemblance to modern cosmetic procedures. What we now consider routine facelifts were experimental operations performed with primitive techniques, no standardized training, and often catastrophic results. The procedures being performed on Hollywood stars in the 1940s and 50s would be considered malpractice today, explains Dr. Robert Kotler, a Beverly Hills plastic surgeon and medical historian who has studied the evolution of cosmetic surgery. Surgeons were literally making it up as they went along, pulling skin so tight it created a mask-like appearance, or using silicone injections that would migrate and harden into disfiguring lumps. There were no safety protocols, no understood limits, no way to predict long-term results. Some of these stars were left so disfigured they couldn't work anymore. The very procedures they underwent to extend their careers ended them. This wasn't just about vanity or poor personal choices. Hollywood's studio system created an environment where aging was career death, particularly for women, pushing stars toward experimental procedures out of economic desperation. The combination of primitive surgical techniques and industry pressure created tragedies that destroyed careers, lives, and legacies. The silent film goddess whose face became so altered she retreated from public life entirely for decades. The glamorous leading lady who underwent so many procedures, she became unrecognizable, spending her final years hidden from the world. The heartthrob whose attempt to maintain his youthful appearance left him with features that ended his romantic lead status overnight. These weren't celebrities who made frivolous choices about cosmetic enhancement. These were desperate professionals trying to survive in an industry that discarded performers the moment they showed signs of age, turning to a medical field that wasn't ready to deliver what it promised. The results were often devastating. The first case reveals how even minor procedures could spiral into tragedy when performed by surgeons who didn't fully understand what they were doing. Number 10. Barbara Payton, the bombshell who lost everything. Barbara Payton was one of Hollywood's rising stars in the late 1940s and early 1950s. The platinum blonde bombshell possessed classic features that seemed tailor-made for Technicolor close-ups. Signed to major studios, she appeared opposite top leading men like James Cagney and Gary Cooper. Her natural beauty seemed destined for long-term stardom. But a combination of hard living and desperate attempts to maintain her youthful appearance through experimental procedures accelerated her decline. Payton underwent multiple cosmetic procedures in the mid-1950s in an attempt to maintain her career, notes Hollywood historian James Robert Parrish, but the primitive techniques available at the time, combined with her struggles with alcohol, created a devastating combination. In 1954, Payton underwent her first facelift attempt, which left her with a tight, unnatural appearance that photographed poorly. By 1956, she sought additional procedures to correct the previous work, but each surgery made things worse. Photographs from the late 1950s showed dramatic deterioration, a combination of surgical scarring, over-tightening, and the effects of her lifestyle, creating a face that bore little resemblance to the beauty who had commanded $5,000 per week just years earlier. Friends from the era reported that Payton was desperate to maintain her looks as her career opportunities dried up. The procedures were attempts to save a career already in decline, but they only hastened her fall from the A-list to increasingly degrading roles. Hollywood's disposable attitude toward aging actresses left Payton with few options. The studios that had once courted her moved on to younger stars, viewing her as damaged goods rather than investing in her potential for character work. By the early 1960s, Payton was virtually unrecognizable from her glamorous heyday. She died in 1967 at just 39 years old, her beauty and career both destroyed by a combination of circumstances and primitive cosmetic procedures that promised salvation but delivered only ruin. While Peyton's decline combined lifestyle factors with surgical mishaps, the next case reveals how even disciplined stars could fall victim to procedures that simply weren't ready for prime time. Number 9. Francis X. Bushman, the silent screen heartthrob who couldn't adapt. Francis X. Bushman was one of the biggest male stars of the silent era. The matinee idol was famous for his classical profile and romantic roles that made women swoon in darkened theaters across America. He was one of the first actors to receive massive fan mail, with thousands of letters arriving weekly at his studio. His face was literally his fortune in the pre-sound era. When sound films arrived and his career began to fade, Bushman made the fateful decision to undergo facial procedures to maintain his youthful appearance. Bushman's attempts at facial surgery in the early 1930s were particularly tragic, explains film historian David Sten, because the procedures available to men were even more experimental than those for women, and the results were often obviously artificial. In 1932, Bushman underwent a facial tightening procedure that was supposed to eliminate sagging around his jawline. The result was an unnaturally smooth appearance that looked wrong on screen, particularly in the unforgiving detail of early sound film technology. Casting directors began avoiding him, with internal studio memos noting his strange appearance that distracted from his performances. Contemporary accounts note Bushman's frustration with how the procedures backfired. Rather than making him look younger, they made him look artificial. The theatrical makeup and lighting of silent films had hidden imperfections that sound-era cameras revealed mercilessly. Male stars faced less pressure than women, but still felt the industry's youth obsession keenly. Bushman's generation of silent stars was particularly vulnerable as sound films changed everything about how movies were made and what audiences expected. Bushman continued working in character roles for decades, but never regained his leading man status. The procedures meant to save his career may have hastened its decline into supporting roles where his altered features were less noticeable. While Bushman's story shows how male stars suffered from surgical experimentation, the next case reveals the particular cruelty faced by actresses whose careers depended entirely on maintaining youthful beauty. Number 8. Gloria Swanson, the queen who waited too long. Gloria Swanson was silent cinema's most glamorous and powerful actress. She commanded enormous salaries, at one point earning $20,000 per week, and had creative control that was rare for any performer in her era. Known for her striking features and expressive face, she embodied the sophistication and allure of 1920s Hollywood. She successfully transitioned to sound films and maintained relevance into the 1950s, even earning an Oscar nomination for her brilliant performance in Sunset Boulevard in 1950. In the 1960s, hoping to extend her career further, Swanson underwent facial procedures that dramatically altered her distinctive appearance. Swanson's decision to have a facelift in her mid-60s reflected both the improving surgical techniques of the era and the persistent pressure on actresses to look younger, notes celebrity biographer Michelle Vogel, but even improved techniques had significant limitations. In the mid-1960s, Swanson underwent a facelift at age 66. While the surgery was performed by a reputable surgeon using more advanced techniques than those available in previous decades, the aesthetic standards of the time favored extreme tightening. The result gave her a startled, mask-like expression that was particularly noticeable in photographs. By the 1970s, images of Swanson showed the distinctive, pulled look that became synonymous with bad facelifts, skin stretched so tight that natural expression became limited. Her final film appearances showed the unnatural results clearly on camera, with younger viewers often unable to reconcile the frozen features with her legendary beauty. Friends noted that Swanson seemed pleased with the results initially, believing the surgery had taken years off her appearance. However, later photographs suggest the procedures didn't age well over time, becoming increasingly obvious as the years passed. By the 1960s, surgical techniques had improved significantly from the 1940s. However, the aesthetic standards of the era led to over-tightening that looked unnatural, particularly as patients aged. The facelift look became recognizable precisely because of high-profile cases like Swanson's, where the work was so obvious it defeated its own purpose. Swanson lived until 1983, her later years marked by the increasingly visible signs of her cosmetic work. The irony was that her strong personality and undeniable talent might have sustained her career without surgical intervention. Audiences were ready to accept her as a grande dame of cinema. While Swanson's procedures reflected the improving but still imperfect techniques of the 1960s, the next star's tragic story reveals what happened when actresses turned to surgery much earlier, in the field's most primitive era. Number 7. Phyllis Haver, the silent star who disappeared. Phyllis Haver was a successful silent film actress of the 1920s. Known for her beauty and comic timing in Max Sennett comedies, she successfully transitioned to dramatic roles that showcased her range as a performer. She married wealthy businessman William Seaman in 1929 and retired from films at the height of her career, seemingly on her own terms, a rare Hollywood happy ending. But in the 1940s, hoping to return to films, Haver underwent facial procedures that went catastrophically wrong. Haver's case is one of the most tragic of the early plastic surgery era, notes film historian Anthony Slide, because she underwent multiple procedures to correct previous work, each one making the situation worse. In the mid-1940s, Haver underwent an initial facelift using the primitive techniques of the era. When the results proved unsatisfactory, she sought corrective surgery that created visible scarring around her hairline and ears. Additional procedures, attempting to fix the scarring, only left her appearance dramatically altered from her screen image. A planned comeback to films was quietly abandoned when screen tests revealed how much her face had changed. Close friends reported that Haver became increasingly reclusive following the surgical disasters. The woman who had once commanded attention on screen now avoided being photographed or seen in public. Her marriage deteriorated under the strain of her psychological distress over her altered appearance. The 1940s represented perhaps the worst era for facial surgery techniques. Surgeons were experimenting with methods that would later be abandoned entirely, and there was no regulation or standardization of procedures. Wealthy patients, like Haver, essentially paid to be guinea pigs for techniques that hadn't been properly tested or refined. Haver died by suicide in 1960 at age 60, ending a life that had been largely hidden from public view for 2 decades. What began as an attempt to revive her career instead trapped her in isolation and despair. While Haver's story reveals the devastating psychological toll of surgical disasters, the next case shows how even world-renowned beauty couldn't survive the primitive techniques of early cosmetic surgery. Number 6. Ancorio, the burlesque queen who lost her trademark. Ancorio was one of burlesque's biggest stars in the 1930s and 1940s. Known for her striking Italian features and curvaceous figure, she successfully transitioned from burlesque to legitimate theater and film appearances. Her distinctive looks, strong features, expressive eyes, and ethnic beauty were central to her brand and marketability. In the 1950s, attempting to soften her features for mainstream Hollywood acceptance, Corio underwent procedures that fundamentally altered her distinctive appearance. Corio's case illustrates a particular problem of the era, explains plastic surgery historian Dr. Sander Gilman. Surgeons often impose their own aesthetic preferences rather than enhancing a performer's natural features, essentially erasing what made them unique. In the mid-1950s, Corio underwent nose surgery and facial contouring meant to give her a more conventional Hollywood look. The procedures eliminated her distinctive ethnic features, creating a more acceptable but also more generic appearance. The result was facial features that fit Hollywood's narrow Anglo beauty standards better, but eliminated the exotic appeal that had made her memorable. Rather than expanding her career opportunities, the loss of her distinctive look reduced her marketability. She was now competing with hundreds of other actresses who had similar features rather than standing out as unique. Corio later expressed regret about the procedures in interviews during the 1970s. She acknowledged that trying to fit Hollywood's narrow beauty standards had been a mistake, and that her distinctive features had been an asset she destroyed trying to conform. Hollywood's pressure to conform to Anglo beauty standards pushed ethnic performers towards surgical modification throughout the studio era. The irony was that distinctive looks were often what made performers memorable and gave them staying power. studios encouraged homogenization that destroyed the uniqueness that had gotten performers noticed in the first place. Choreo found success later in life by embracing her burlesque roots and producing nostalgia shows that celebrated the era when her natural beauty had reigned. But the lost years and altered features represented a sacrifice to Hollywood's narrow vision of acceptable beauty. While Choreo's story shows the cost of conforming to narrow beauty standards, the next star's experience reveals how even subtle procedures could spiral into disaster with primitive surgical techniques. Number 5. Lupe Velez, the Mexican Spitfire, whose last years were hidden. Lupe Velez was one of Hollywood's most vibrant personalities in the 1930s and early 1940s. Known as the Mexican Spitfire for her fiery screen presence and rapid-fire delivery, she successfully starred in both dramatic and comedy roles. Her exotic beauty and energetic performances made her a major box office draw, with her comedy series becoming some of the most profitable B-movies of the era. She brought a unique combination of sexuality, humor, and genuine charisma that audiences found irresistible. But by the early 1940s, facing increasing competition from younger actresses and Hollywood's evolving beauty standards, Velez turned to cosmetic procedures that would alter her distinctive features. Velez underwent facial procedures in the early 1940s that were meant to give her a more conventional Hollywood look, explains Latin film historian Alicia I. Rodriguez Estrada, but the surgeries began to change the expressive mobility that had made her such an effective performer. In 1942, Velez underwent her first facial tightening procedures. Friends noted that her features became less mobile afterward, affecting the comic timing that had been central to her appeal. Photographs from this period show a harder, less expressive face. The procedures had literally restricted her ability to make the exaggerated expressions that had made her comedy work so well. Career opportunities diminished as her distinctive appeal faded, with studios uncertain how to cast an actress who looked different but not necessarily younger. By 1944, she was struggling to find work, with her last Mexican Spitfire film performing poorly at the box office. Letters and diary entries from Velez's final years reveal deep insecurity about aging in an industry that had typecast her in ethnic roles. She felt trapped between losing her distinctive features to appear more conventionally attractive and facing career extinction as Hollywood moved away from the exotic stereotypes that had defined her career. Hollywood's treatment of Latina actresses in this era was particularly cruel. They were typecast in exotic, often demeaning roles, then discarded when they aged or tried to expand their range. The pressure to Americanize their features through surgery was intense, yet the loss of distinctive ethnic beauty often meant total career death. They lost what made them special without gaining access to mainstream roles. Velez died by suicide in December 1944 at age 36, during a period of profound career and personal crisis. While multiple factors contributed to her death, including a troubled relationship and unwanted pregnancy, her despair over her fading career and altered appearance was part of the tragic equation that ended her life. While Velez's story reveals the particular cruelty faced by ethnic actresses in Hollywood's golden age, the next case shows how even all-American beauty icons couldn't escape the pressure to undergo experimental procedures. Number 4. Constance Bennett, the sophisticated star who went too far. Constance Bennett was one of the highest-paid actresses of the early 1930s. At her peak, she earned $30,000 per week, more than any other actress in Hollywood and more than most studio executives. Known for her sophisticated beauty and impeccable style, she commanded enormous salaries and had significant career control, unusual for the era. Her elegant features and cool blonde beauty defined Depression-era glamour, and she parlayed her success into shrewd business ventures. But Bennett's determination to maintain her youthful appearance led her to undergo multiple facial procedures throughout the 1940s and 1950s, each one attempting to correct the damage from previous surgeries. Bennett was one of the first major stars to openly seek cosmetic surgery, notes celebrity biographer Brian Kello, which unfortunately meant she was also one of the first to experience the catastrophic results when surgeons lacked the knowledge to perform safe, natural-looking procedures. In the mid-1940s, Bennett underwent her first major facelift, which left her with noticeably tightened features that looked somewhat artificial on screen. By the late 1940s, corrective surgery created visible scarring around her ears and hairline that required heavy makeup and careful lighting to conceal. In the early 1950s, additional procedures gave her the frozen, mask-like appearance that became associated with bad cosmetic work. Her face had been pulled so tight that natural expression became limited. By the mid-1950s, photographs showed dramatically altered features that bore only passing resemblance to her earlier appearance. Film roles decreased steadily as her appearance became increasingly artificial, with directors finding her difficult to light and photograph effectively. Colleagues noted Bennett's increasing use of heavy makeup to hide surgical scars and unnatural tightness. She became defensive about her appearance in later years, refusing to discuss her surgeries publicly. Friends reported that she regretted the early procedures but felt trapped in a cycle of corrections, each surgery attempting to fix problems created by the previous one. Bennett's wealth gave her access to the most expensive surgeons in Beverly Hills and Europe. But in the 1940s, expensive didn't mean skilled or knowledgeable in cosmetic procedures. Many cosmetic surgeons were essentially experimenting on wealthy clients, using techniques adapted from reconstructive surgery without understanding facial aesthetics. The lack of medical standards meant even elite practitioners frequently produced poor results. Bennett continued working until shortly before her death in 1965 at age 60. Her later photographs reveal the accumulated damage of multiple procedures performed over 2 decades. A cautionary tale of cosmetic surgery's primitive era that she helped inadvertently to document for future generations. While Bennett's multiple surgeries created a cumulative disaster, the next star's tragedy occurred with years of incremental changes that destroyed one of Hollywood's most famous faces. Number 3. Hedy Lamarr, the most beautiful woman in the world who became unrecognizable. Hedy Lamarr was literally marketed as the most beautiful woman in the world. Her stunning features made her an international sensation from her first Hollywood film, 1938's Algiers, where her face stopped traffic and made careers. Beyond her beauty, she was a brilliant inventor who co-developed frequency-hopping technology that would later become foundational to Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Her face represented the pinnacle of Golden Age Hollywood glamour, flawless, exotic, unforgettable, the standard by which all other beauty was measured. But Lamarr's desperate attempts to maintain that legendary beauty through increasingly aggressive procedures would transform one of cinema's most famous faces into something unrecognizable. Lamarr underwent so many facial procedures over the years that she essentially reconstructed her entire face, notes author Richard Rhodes, who documented her life and scientific achievements. None of the surgeries seemed to satisfy her or recapture what time had naturally taken. In the 1950s, Lamarr began having facelifts that were initially subtle, tightening skin that was beginning to show age. By the 1960s, she underwent multiple procedures, including eye work and facial tightening that began to alter her distinctive bone structure. The 1970s brought aggressive surgeries that dramatically changed the appearance of her bone structure, with procedures that pulled skin so tight her face lost its natural contours. By the 1980s, her face had become increasingly taut and mask-like, with features pulled so tight that natural expression became virtually impossible. Later photographs show a face that was unrecognizable from her screen image, the soft, exotic beauty replaced by a tight, artificial appearance that shocked those who remembered her legendary looks. Lamarr became increasingly reclusive in her later decades, rarely appearing in public and refusing to be photographed. She reportedly destroyed mirrors in her home, unable to bear seeing her reflection. Her son, Anthony Loder, later described his mother's obsession with maintaining her beauty and the psychological toll it took on her final decades. The constant surgeries, the isolation, the depression that came from chasing an impossible goal. Lamarr's case was particularly tragic because her intelligence should have been her legacy. Instead, Hollywood's fixation on her beauty made her feel her worth depended entirely on her looks. When her acting career faded in the 1950s, she had no other professional identity despite her significant scientific contributions. The industry that created her beauty obsession provided no other paths for her. She was beauty first, intelligence a distant second, and when the beauty faded, she felt she had nothing left. Lamar died in 2000 at age 85, having spent decades hidden from the world. The brilliant mind that helped develop technology used in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth was overshadowed by a lifetime of chasing an impossible standard of youth. Her tragedy wasn't just physical, but existential, proof that genius and beauty both were ultimately disposable to an industry that valued only the moment. While Lamar's story spans decades of incremental changes, the next star's experience reveals how Hollywood's racist beauty standards drove performers to destroy what made them unique. Number 2. Anna May Wong, the trailblazing star pressured to change everything. Anna May Wong was Hollywood's first Chinese-American movie star. Her striking beauty and undeniable talent broke racial barriers in 1920s and 1930s, achieving international fame despite Hollywood's systematically racist casting practices that relegated Asian performers to stereotyped roles. She became a fashion icon in Europe and America, with her distinctive features instantly recognizable worldwide. She represented possibility, proof that talent and beauty could transcend Hollywood's narrow racial boundaries. But Hollywood's racist beauty standards pushed Wong toward procedures to make her features more acceptable to Western audiences, a pressure that would contribute to both physical and psychological damage. Wong faced pressure throughout her career to surgically alter her features to appear more westernized, notes Asian-American film scholar Graham Russell Gowhodges, and while evidence suggests she resisted most of these pressures, she did undergo procedures in the 1940s as her career opportunities dried up. In the 1940s, facing dramatically decreased roles as Hollywood's already limited interest in Asian performers waned further, Wong underwent eyelid surgery. The procedures were meant to create more open eyes that would be more acceptable to Western audiences who found her distinctive features too foreign. The result was loss of her distinctive look that had made her famous. The procedures eliminated what made her special without making her more castable. Rather than expanding her career opportunities, the changes made her less unique in an industry that had valued her precisely for her exotic appearance. Her career opportunities continued to decline as she became neither slash nor in Hollywood's rigid racial typecasting, no longer exotic enough for stereotyped Asian roles, but never acceptable for the mainstream roles reserved for white actresses. Letters from Wong's later life reveal deep conflict about her choices and the impossible position Hollywood had forced her into. She felt caught between maintaining authenticity and surviving in a profoundly racist industry. Friends reported her growing despair over the impossible choices she faced: change her appearance and lose what made her special, or refuse and watch her career disappear anyway. Hollywood's treatment of Asian performers was particularly cruel in this era. Studios would routinely cast white actors in yellowface for Asian roles, while simultaneously denying Asian actors access to any other parts. The pressure to westernize was intense, yet doing so eliminated the exotic appeal that got performers cast in the first place. Wong was trapped in an impossible situation created entirely by systemic racism. Every choice led to career death. Wong died in 1961 at age 56, her final years marked by struggles with alcohol and depression. Her story represents not just a surgical tragedy, but the human cost of Hollywood's racism. A brilliant performer forced to choose between her identity and her career, with no winning option available to her. While Wong's story reveals the racist pressures that drove some stars to surgery, the final case represents the most famous surgical disaster in Hollywood history. A transformation so dramatic, it ended a reign that had lasted 3 decades. Number 1. Mary Pickford, America's sweetheart who vanished from the world. Mary Pickford wasn't just a star, she was Hollywood royalty. America's Sweetheart was one of the most famous women in the world during the silent era, commanding audiences and box office receipts that made her one of the most powerful people in the entertainment industry. She co-founded United Artists with Charlie Chaplin, Douglas Fairbanks, and D.W. Griffith, commanding unprecedented creative and financial control at a time when most actors were essentially studio property. Her cherubic features and golden curls were among the most recognizable images in the world, gracing millions of photographs, posters, and magazine covers. For over 2 decades, she was essentially the face of American cinema itself. But a single facelift in 1936 would transform Pickford's face so dramatically that she would spend the remaining 43 years of her life largely hidden from public view. Pickford's facelift is considered one of the most catastrophic cosmetic surgery disasters in Hollywood history, notes film historian Crystal Schmidt, not just because of the physical results, but because of the psychological devastation it caused one of the industry's most powerful figures. In 1936, at age 43, Pickford underwent a facelift that was meant to help her transition to mature dramatic roles. The procedure used primitive 1930s techniques that essentially involved pulling skin back tightly and cutting away excess tissue without any real understanding of facial structure or aesthetics. The result was a tight, mask-like appearance with visible scarring around her hairline and ears. Her distinctive soft, cherubic features, the face that had made her America's sweetheart, became hard and artificial-looking, the natural warmth replaced by a frozen quality. A planned comeback film was abandoned when Pickford saw the screen tests and realized how dramatically her appearance had changed. Pickford began withdrawing from public life almost immediately after the surgery, canceling appearances and avoiding photographers. By the 1940s, she rarely left her estate Pickfair, the legendary mansion she had shared with Douglas Fairbanks. Photographers who glimpsed her in later years described a face that bore little resemblance to the woman millions had loved. The tight skin had created permanent distortion. By the 1960s and 1970s, she became almost completely reclusive, eventually almost never appearing even to close friends, conducting business by telephone from her bedroom. Pickford's close friend, actress Lillian Gish, later wrote about the tragedy in her memoir. Mary never forgave herself for that surgery. Gish recalled, she felt she had destroyed the face that millions had loved, and she couldn't bear for anyone to see what she'd done. Other friends reported that Pickford would only meet visitors in dimly lit rooms, positioning herself so that harsh light never fell directly on her face. Pickford's case revealed the truly primitive state of 1930s cosmetic surgery. Surgeons were using techniques adapted from reconstructive work on war injuries, with no understanding of facial aesthetics or how faces aged naturally. There were no protocols for how much skin to remove or how tight to pull. Surgeons literally learned through trial and error on patients' faces. The wealthy and powerful, like Pickford, were essentially guinea pigs for experimental procedures that hadn't been properly developed or tested. Even co-founding a studio and being one of Hollywood's most powerful figures couldn't protect Pickford from an industry that valued youth above all else. The pressure to remain young-looking was so intense that even a woman with unprecedented power felt compelled to risk experimental surgery. When it went wrong, that same industry had no use for her. There were no character roles waiting, no dignified transition to mature actress. The surgery occurred in 1936, but its impact lasted until Pickford's death in 1979, a span of 43 years. For more than 4 decades, one of the most famous women in the world lived in self-imposed exile. She continued to work behind the scenes in business, managing her considerable fortune and United Artists holdings, but never appeared publicly again. Her final decades were spent largely alone at Pickfair, the mansion that had once hosted the most glittering parties in Hollywood, now silent and shuttered. When she died, few people under 40 even remembered who she had been. Her legend had faded along with her face. Mary Pickford's tragedy wasn't just medical, it was existential. A woman who had wielded extraordinary power and commanded the world's attention was reduced to hiding in shadows by a single failed procedure. Her 43-year seclusion stands as the longest aftermath of any Golden Age plastic surgery disaster. The face that had once been America's sweetheart became a cautionary tale about the terrible price of Hollywood's worship of eternal youth. These weren't stories of vanity or poor judgment. They were tragedies created by the collision of Hollywood's brutal ageism with a medical field that wasn't ready to deliver what it promised. The primitive surgical techniques of the 1930s through 1960s essentially made guinea pigs of desperate performers. What we now consider routine procedures were experimental operations with unpredictable results and often devastating consequences that destroyed lives. Hollywood created an environment where aging meant career death, pushing performers toward dangerous experimental procedures as acts of professional survival. The studios profited from youth, while discarding those who showed signs of age, leaving performers with impossible choices and often tragic outcomes. Which of these stories affected you most? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you found this exploration of Hollywood's dark history valuable, like and subscribe for more untold stories from entertainment's past. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.